Because bullet depth is important. After tightening it down, I'm going to test it again. See how the bullet doesn't sit so very well in there when the case isn't built out too well. Just about perfect. 1.274, I would say. So, that's in good shape. We're leaving it the way it is. Let's go on to station 4. The last station is a crimping station. That's where we're going to take this hollow die, the crimping die. We're going to screw it in around halfway or so. The job of this die is to get rid of that belling and crimp the case around the bullet. There's a lot of different thoughts about crimping. Some things you have to crimp a lot, some things you don't have to crimp at all. I tend not to crimp my rifle cases that much. I don't crimp 45 ACP at all, I just sort of get rid of the bell. However, if you notice, if you're shooting when the gun's recoiling and the bullets are actually pulling out, you may need to crimp them down a little bit tighter. Anyway, I screw this down about halfway or so. I'm going to put that belled cartridge in there. I'm going to pull the handle. I'm going to take a look. It hasn't quite taken all that belling out, so I'm going to screw it down a little bit more. Run it through again. That looks good. So, I'll put the cartridge in there, run it up, and tighten it down with the lock washer. Once those are set, you can take the tool head pins, put them in. Easier if you lower the shell plate. And now, the tool head's all set up and ready to go. So you can see it takes me about a half an hour to fully set up a tool head from scratch to the point where it's really ready to go. That's why, at least for this press, I really like investing in these tool heads for each caliber that I reload. A tool head is about $10 to $15, depending on whether you get it new or used. For me, it's worth spending the money so I don't have to spend a half an hour setting it up each time. Alright, let's take a look at the actual reloading components themselves. What you're going to need is, you're going to need some brass. I've got a milk jug here full. You're going to need some powder. They make a lot of different kinds. You're going to need some primers. There are a few different kinds of those. You're going to need bullets, and there are a lot of different kinds of those too. The next thing you have to do is go to your reloading manual and figure out which one of these things you're going to need. Alright, turning to our reloading manual, the 45 ACP page. You can tell it gives you the overall specs of the cartridge here, the way they tested it, their test specifications, some comments on the cartridge. And then they list recipes by bullet type. 185 jacketed lead, 200 grain jacketed hollow point, 230 grain true metal jacket, which is another word for copper bullet. This is what I'm using here. Let's focus on this load. They list a number of different types of powder here. 700X, Bullseye, SR7625, Unique, etc., etc., etc. There are a lot of arguments for each one. I happen to have some Bullseye and some Unique, so that's what I'm going to use. In fact, I've got more Unique than I've got Bullseye, so I'm just going to choose that. According to their ratings, the one that they have listed in bold is the most accurate round. I don't have any 700X, so I'm not going to do that one. Starting with Unique, it suggests using 5.9 grains of gunpowder to start. giving you a velocity of 749 feet per second and a pressure of 12,500. It suggests you don't ever go over 6.6 grains of unique, giving you a velocity of 825 feet per second and a pressure of 15,800. Now, it's always good to check out a second book. So while the lineman manual has that information, which I'll keep in mind, I'm going to go over my spear manual and look up the same bullet. 225, 230 grain true metal jacket bullet is right here. These guys also list bullseye and unique. Oh, look at this. The spear manual says for unique powder, you want to start with 5.5 grains and don't go higher than 6.5 grains, giving you these respective feet per second times. Okay, so it looks like we've got our recipe pretty much dialed in. I'm going to be starting on the lower end of the spectrum here, as you should also, and start with 6 grains of unique. Both are fairly well within tolerances for both of these recipes. Alright, I'm going to fill the automatic powder measure first. I'm going to check the powder for my recipe. I'm going to use unique, 6 grains. Pop over the top. Just pour it right in. Now what you should do is you should take the powder that you just used and filled up your powder measure with, keep it here on your desk. Reason being is if you return it to your shelf, you may have 5 or 6 other similar powders up there. I've got Bullseye, I've got Unique, I've got an older version of Unique, I've got IMR, I've got a bunch of stuff up there. And while some powder looks alike, so if you put it away, how do you really know what you have in here, and how do you know which container to return it to when you're done? Always a good idea to keep it right there. Alright, now we're going to test out the powder charge. I'm going to take a case, put it right into this station, cycle the machine. The station bells out the mouth and pours a certain amount of powder in here. How much powder? I don't know right now. I have to measure it. I was loading for 44 Magnum a little while ago, so it's probably a lot. Alright, here's where our handy dandy reloading scale comes into play. You want to keep your reloading scale covered up because you don't want dust and junk falling on it all the time, because it's very delicate and it will get knocked out of proper calibration. That's why I just made this with the box that it came in. So the first thing you want to do is zero out the scale. When you zero out the scale, putting it on a relatively level surface, making sure that the 10th, the grain, and the 10 grain indicator are all on 0. Wait for the thing to stabilize, and then spinning this foot to raise or lower the entire scale. And what you want to do is you want to put this pointer equal to the 0 marker. I'm extending this foot until it's just about level right there. That's perfect. That right there is a zeroed scale. So we want to put 6 grains of powder in here. So we'll move this over to the 6 mark. If it was 6.2, we'd move this guy over to the 0.2. 6.5, move it over to the 0.5. But we're just doing 6.0. You take the powder you've thrown, you toss it in. It looks like it's heavier or more than 6. So you take this, we dump it right back in the powder measure. Alright, here is where you adjust your powder charge. Turning it clockwise will give you more powder. Counterclockwise will give you less powder. Now it's too heavy, it's too much powder, so we want less. So I'll give it a good spin, turn and a half or so, like that. And we'll see what that does. What I like to do, after I've adjusted the powder bar here, is throw the powder a few times. Once, again, just dumping it back on the top. I want the powder bar to kind of just get adjusted. The change later. fourth or fifth try, this is what I'm going to measure in the scale. I'll tap out the last couple of grains in here. It's close, but it's not exact. You see how it's just a little bit heavy. I'll bet you it's about 5.1 grains. Well, maybe 5.2. Sorry, 6.2. Yep, it's about 6.2. I move this over here. This one's at 6, this one's at 0.2. Right now it's throwing 6.2 grains of powder, but I only want 6. So dump this back into the powder area, do it again.